Hello everyone, today I wanted to talk about my unread bestsellers. So the books that I own that I feel like the entirety of the world has read and I haven't. They're books that either I've bought because of the hype and I kind of want to know whether they're worth it. I'm basically exposing my kind of unread books really. I am slightly ashamed about how many books currently is on my floor, but I do think it's kind of in their favour that actually out of all of the unhauls I've done, the moves I've done, these books have stayed with me. And obviously there are some new ones as well because I keep buying them, hence why I'm on a ban. But some of these books I know that I will love them and have particular memories with them. So I'm hoping that by filming this video and sharing my choices with you, you will let me know which ones are definitely worth the hype. And the aim of the game really is the fact that I won't need to buy any more books because I will discover my next favourite book here already on my TBR shelf. I'm going to start with the book that has been on my TBR shelf for the longest, and like a lot of these actually, I have read more than half of this book and then just abandoned it, and not because I didn't love it, just because I tend to do that when I get distracted by another book that has a lot of hype around it. So this is kind of like a slight graveyard of books really, which isn't good, but we're hoping that this video will sort it all out. But the first book is The Time Traveller's Wife. My first memory of actually wanting to read this is because of my mum. I remember as a very young teenager going into her room, I think we must have been out on holiday, and she was sobbing. My mum never cries, like she's not particularly emotional, and she was just beside herself, and this is one of her favourite books. And we watched the film together, and even though my mum did not like the film, to this day she still kind of talks about how much she didn't like the film because the ending was changed. And I did read this and was kind of really enjoying it but never finished it. But I think because I know that my mum loves it so much, I think it will be a special book because it will be something that kind of we'll share, and I kind of like reading things that I know she's really enjoyed because I feel kind of close to her in that moment. That shows that I am emotional and she is not, because she would not care, but I take that very seriously. So yes, I definitely need to read this at some point. Next is All the Light We Cannot See. This was extremely popular on Booktube when it came out, and I actually bought this edition when I was working at HarperCollins, and so I only even bought the book then, like years after it came out. I love historical fiction and I love World War II historical fiction, and even again another book that I've started and probably read like into them. I don't know what's wrong with me. I have like massive commitment issues with books, but this is a book that I just know I will adore, and I think because I know I will love it so much that I think I'm slightly afraid of reading it because I think it will be such a special reading experience. One thing I should say, and I think is actually the reason that I have put this off, is because I think this is a really great piece of World War II kind of historical fiction, and I'm very wary of this genre because I think you can get some really weird saviour narratives and where kind of genocide is used as a plot device or a marketing tool, and it often makes me feel very uncomfortable, and I often feel just quite suspicious, and I don't think this is the reading experience I'll have with this book. And I think because I know that deep down I'm putting it off because I actually think that these type of books, I mean I haven't read it so I don't know, but I think they're actually a lot rarer. Like good World War II historical fiction I think is actually rarer. There is so much of it, but I think the good ones actually are quite far and few between. But as I haven't read it, I don't know. The Night Circus. This was actually given to me when I was a bookseller at Waterstones by a children's bookseller, and it was her favourite novel. And because I took that recommendation so strongly and the way she talked about it, I was so moved by her passion for this book and this world and these characters. I think this recommendation came about because I was saying how I never really read any fantasy or any books that have any kind of fantastical elements or magic in them, and I certainly didn't as a child either, and I think she kind of felt like that was a problem she needed to solve, and this was almost a book she gave me to remedy my lack of magic in my life. And I know I will really enjoy it, but I think because it was such a special recommendation and I just haven't found the right time, but I know a lot of people really love this book, and I feel like this should be like a winter book for me. I've just kind of missed winter, or like an autumn book. But I honestly was going to read it this year and then just didn't. And I think it's because I just feel like one day I'll wake up and I'll know it's time for the Night Circus. Life After Life. This is the perfect example of me finding a book that has all the perfect elements, including the blitz of a book that, you know, historical fiction that I just know I will die for. And it's also an author who I've been wanting to read for a really long time and have had so many brilliant things. It was actually first recommended to me by a university lecturer who just thought I would love it. But I didn't actually buy it until 2019 because I found my little WH Smith receipt which told me I bought it in May, and I also bought a packet of barbecue pop chips, and I was obsessed with pop chips for like an entire year. But this has definitely been on like my mental TBR since 2014 because it's got all those elements I know I love, and also Kate Atkinson. I think Kate Atkinson is from York, which I think is why I was first recommended her, because there's a novel that she wrote which is about set in York, but I didn't like the sound of that one as much, so the lecturer recommended me this. But yeah, I know I'm going to love it, and I think this is one of those books that could be my soul book, like, you know, one of my 5-star reads. If this video was like my 5-star recommendation video, this would be like at the very top. So going back to what I said about kind of World War II historical fiction with all the like you cannot see, or not necessarily that book, but just being quite critical sometimes of fiction around kind of the Holocaust in particular, this is a book I am kind of suspicious of because of what happened after the tourist of Auschwitz, but also I think with Heather Morris's novel Silka's Journey. And I haven't actually heard anything about the new one, which is Three Sisters. But The Tattooist of Auschwitz is a novel based on the real life story of a Holocaust survivor, and it was written kind of with Heather kind of listening to tapes and kind of a more collaborative process, and was written for that man. But what then kind of happened afterwards is that just a lot of problematic shit went down. And because of that, I was originally sent this book a long time ago and never read it. And then I bought it again in a charity shop thinking, actually, I think I would like to read this because everybody else has read it and it says such wonderful things about it. But I don't necessarily feel comfortable giving Heather Morris my money. It feels beyond problematic to talk about this book in relation with kind of hype, but I have read some really kind of thoughtful reviews of this book where people have found it really thought-provoking and moving, and therefore I feel like I want to give it a shot, but I also feel a bit weird. But I don't know if I'm just now becoming weird about it for no reason, because a lot of people have really loved it. So I think I need to read it and make up my own mind. The next book is definitely a controversial read, and one that people either really get destroyed by or completely love, and that is A Little Life. This has been on my TBR for a really long time, and I really love kind of chunky books, and I know that I think I will really, I don't know if enjoyed is the right word to use with A Little Life, but I think that I will, you know, I love kind of being immersed in big stories and kind of lots of different characters, but I don't know, the reason I haven't read it is that I'm not ready for the emotional damage that people are telling me will come with reading this book. I was actually going to read A Little Life back in 2020, and I posted about it on my Instagram, and I've never had so many messages of people telling me not to read a book. Obviously I do have people telling me not to read certain books or judging which books I'm reading, but I've never had like people actually just caring about me and be like, please don't read it. But I have to be honest, the more people who told me not to read A Little Life made me want to read it more, and I just think I need to find the right time that I can, dedicate, you know, I'm a really slow reader, I can dedicate time to this big book and also be in the right headspace, I think, to be really involved in characters, but also kind of go on this journey. Another really emotional read is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and I was really actually just intrigued by this book because of BookTok, and partly because it was really popular back in kind of early BookTube when the book first came out, and I wasn't really a part of kind of the Colleen Hoover kind of community on Booktube, so I've kind of heard a lot about it but never read it. And this is actually what I'm currently reading, and at the moment I don't know if it's worth the hype, because I think I'm just not that great with emotional love stories like this. I think with love stories, I think I either just like want a nice like rom-com. I'm gonna see how I feel, so I would definitely be interested if any of you really love this book and if you think that I will really love it, or whether it needs to be a DNF. But because so many people just adore this book, I don't want to give up on it because I feel like I might be missing out on something really special. I'm only at the very beginning, so maybe I will find something really special in the book. I feel like a couple of these book choices might surprise some of you who've been watching my channel for a long time. They might not feel like my normal kind of go-to books, but partly a lot of these books I would class as like commercial fiction, and I know that kind of commercial versus literary is very objective, but because I work on commercial fiction and we often look to what books are really working well across all different genres, some of the books that obviously are trending right now, we look, and I know the editorial team will kind of take note from it, but I also take note from how kind of books are trending and how they're being marketed, so I like to kind of keep an eye on trendy books and read them, just so I kind of remain up to date with the publishing world, especially online, and that is the reason that I read Colleen Hoover this time, because we've been talking about it at work a lot, and also then trying to find, you know, a writer who we know will be our Colleen Hoover, because that's how publishing works. I've actually got 2 Colleen Hoovers on this list, and the second one is Verity. I actually bought this at recommendation from one of my very best friends, who, when I said that I was currently reading It Ends With Us, she said to me, no, you need to read Verity, and I really trust her opinion. And the reason she said that I need to read Verity is because I love Rebecca, and she said it's kind of a Rebecca gothic thriller, and already the very first line of this book just absolutely grabbed me. Let's find it. I hear the crack of his skull before the splattering of blood reaches me. Love it. Another really dark book that was recommended to me by a colleague I worked with at HarperCollins and a friend, and she has the best taste, and we read very different books, but I remember her talking about Night House when it first came out, and the way she talked about it, and The Dark Academia, which is 100% my thing, and again, another book that I've read half of and kind of enjoyed but never finished. This is also a book that kind of belongs to both Ben and I, because he also has been really intrigued by Night House, and this was a book that at the time everybody was talking about it, and I definitely followed the hype, one, listening to her recommendation, but also just buying, because it's not really a book I would have read. But I think at the time I had just read Addie LaRue, and Addie LaRue was a book that I bought just because of the hype, just because everyone in Bookstagram was talking about it, and Addie LaRue is one of my all-time favourite books. I love that book so much, and so after that I kind of thought I need to rethink which books I'm picking up and when I'm actually just kind of ignoring hype, because sometimes hype can be around, you know, just because that's what society does, but sometimes it is actually just because the book's really, really great. A book I had never even heard about before TikTok, The Love Hypothesis. I love that it even has like a TikTok roundel. This is fascinating to me as someone who works in publishing, because now I'm seeing so many kind of Amazon subtitles change to kind of as seen on TikTok or trending on TikTok, which is just really, really interesting. But I really love rom-coms, and I read a lot of them in 2020, but then took a massive break in 2021, and I have been really wanting to read rom-coms. I've kind of struggled to get into books, so like, I read some really great books at the start of the year and then just kind of didn't find the right book, and so I really kind of want to get back into reading just with a kind of a light-hearted rom-com, and I think this sounds amazing. This is a new purchase for me, and also I just love the kind of the idea of like PhD students. I love the fake relationship trope. This is another book that I bought for kind of work research, because I work in romance publishing and I have to stay up to date with how different kind of publishers and writers are using romance tropes, and I think it's going to be a really great read, but I'm also interested to see what impact this book has on the romance publishing industry, because all of these books, all of these bestsellers really change the publishing industry and change the editorial decisions that get made, and also what the covers look like. So I always kind of like to keep up to date with kind of what's coming out, but this is a rom-com I think I will just adore. Another book I discovered through BookTok, the Ex Hex. I love witches. I know this wasn't impulse buy for me. A lot of these were very considered purchases or recommended, but this was just pure impulse. And I love anything witchy. I just know that come the autumn I will love this. I wanted to read it this autumn but evidently didn't. But I think this will be the perfect book to kind of curl up with kind of like a cinnamon roll and a hot chocolate, and then I will go and buy a black cat because I think Sybil needs a sister, and that is unrelated, but I will be really kind of feeling the witch vibes. Except this also feels like the book I want to read tonight because it is windy and cold and wet, and you know, I want to go and make a spell in the bathtub, so who knows. The next book, and yes, I'm realising just how much I'm saying the next book, the next one. There are a lot of books here, but the next one is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. The Seven Wives of Evelyn? No, it's not Seven Wives. Well, it could have been The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I say Evelyn, like Evelyn Waugh, but I'm pretty certain it's Evelyn. I should say The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is one of my all-time favourite novels. And that was another book that I bought purely for kind of Bookstagram hype. And I'm so glad I did because I discovered a brilliant writer. And I did read Daisy Jones and the Six, and I really enjoyed it, but it didn't quite hit the spot that Evelyn did, but I think that was because it was set in Hollywood and it was a bisexual character, and just, you know, just really enjoyed it. Because of my love for Evelyn and also my love of Taylor Jenkins Reid writing, also in Daisy Jones and the Six, this is one of my most anticipated reads, and I was very kindly sent this, and to my great shame I haven't read it yet, but I think I will love it. And to be honest, it took me a good couple of years to read Evelyn, and it also took me at least a year since I got Daisy Jones to read Daisy Jones. I am a person who buys a book and then reads it the next year. It's very rare that I buy a book straight away and read it straight away. I tend to use my bookshelves as kind of a little lending library just for me. No one else borrows my books. That is forbidden. I have been hurt too many times over the years to lend books. But because of this, I have had this book now for, God, I don't even know when it came out. It would definitely be a year or two. 2021, I've had the book for a year, so I'm thinking 2022 will be the year I read it. And also because it's just been announced that she has a new book coming out, which I'm excited for, but I feel like I should read this one first because otherwise I'll never read it. The Song of Achilles, because everybody loves this book. I honestly had no interest in reading this book before kind of seeing everybody talk about it on BookTok, Booktube, everywhere. And I spoke to Ben about it, and Ben was really interested in reading it, so he did the very odd thing of buying the book and then reading it straight away. But I think why I've been slightly delayed is that Ben really enjoyed it. He thought it was a great book, but everybody I have seen read this book has just been crying and so emotional. And I'm sure that obviously Ben has different emotional reactions than I do, but I was kind of thinking it might break him. And so when it didn't break him, I was a bit like, oh, okay. And so I haven't yet read it, but we only did buy it like last year, so maybe I'll read it the year after. But I think I will really enjoy this for kind of queer representation, though I also think the reason I'm slightly anxious about reading this book is because I know nothing about mythology, whereas it was something that Ben was really interested in. I always kind of joke saying that this is evidence that I didn't go to a posh school and Ben did, because I have no clue who any of these people are. So I think I have a big bit of imposter syndrome actually, and that is one of the reasons that I haven't yet read this book, because to be honest, I don't feel clever enough to know who any of these people are. We are now finally at the last two books. There have been a lot of books in this unread pile, which doesn't make me feel particularly good about myself. But if you are still here, thank you for watching. And in fact, you are here, leave I think they have a black cat emoji, like one of those little walking cats, you know, not just like the cat face, but like the cat with legs. Leave that in the comments and then I'll know, because maybe it would just be me leaving emojis. The penultimate book, which I'm now really struggling, I've had to say the words so many times, penultimate. I think that's how you pronounce it. The Vanishing Half. This is actually a recommendation from my mother-in-law, and it's been on my list for a really long time, ever since it's been hardback and everybody adored it. I find the kind of theme topic of passing really interesting. It was something I studied a lot at university, obviously around kind of Nella Larsen's passing, and I think I will find this book, I just think I will love it, and I think because I know I'll love it, I've been putting it off, but obviously that's not really good enough reason, so I think I'm definitely going to read this year. I've just realised that The Vanishing Half actually wasn't the penultimate book, even though I know I could edit it to make it the penultimate book, but I'm an honest soul, so I'm not going to do that. One Day. This book is almost at like classic cult level, because I feel like everybody has read and loved One Day. I've never heard a single bad thing about it. I just kept meaning to buy a copy of One Day and then never did. And then so when in 2019 it was the 10th anniversary of One Day and people were kind of talking about it again, I finally bought a copy. But this isn't the 10th anniversary edition. I think it was just what they had at W.H. Smith's in London Bridge Station again, because I found a receipt. Evidently I must have bought a lot of books on my lunch break at that job, which is kind of odd because you'd think that working in like the HarperCollins building surrounded by books, and also that has a bookshop in the building with like 60% off, you would think I wouldn't buy other books on my lunch break, but the receipts that I'm finding in a lot of these books definitely kind of says otherwise. And finally, the last book, The Taxidermist Daughter by Kate Moss. Kate Moss is obviously a really famous historical writer, and I've just never read a single thing by her, which goes for a lot of these books. They're kind of authors that I've been meaning to read for a really long time, and I've got one book by them, and that's how I'm going to start that journey, but I evidently just haven't. The Taxidermist Daughter, I think, is one of Kate Moss's most famous pieces of writing, and it's dark and gothic and everything that I know I will love about a novel. Maybe I just have this thing about authors whose names are Kate, because thinking about it, I'm the same with Kate Atkinson. Like, I've never really known where to start. And also Kate Morton, which I think is actually, I always get Kate Moss and Kate Morton confused, and I don't know if they write, I think they kind of write similar books, kind of like historical, but I have kind of a lot of Kate Morton on my Kindle, or I have like one Kate Morton on my Kindle, but she's another writer that I think I would really love, but just don't know where to start. So I often go on which books are their best-selling books and which books have kind of captured people's imaginations and hearts, hence why for Kate Moss I picked The Taxidermist Daughter. So they are all my unread bestsellers, obviously not including all the classics that I haven't read yet, which obviously is a whole bookshelf, but I think a lot of these books are books that I don't necessarily tend to talk about on my channel, and I know there'll be a few surprises, but actually overall I think you get a really good sense of who I am as a reader and what type of books I enjoy reading and what I look for in different books, and how that even changes over time and kind of why I want to read things. And I hope that there are some books here that you have loved and read, so you can let me know if you think I will love them. But equally, if there are any books that you just think are not worth the hype, that information is just as useful. A huge thank you if you watched the end of this video, and I hope to see you again soon in the next one.